All right, fantastic. All right. Well, Lyle, to start off with, what is the trading name of the business, please?
CDG Enterprises?
Mm-hmm. And do you operate under any other names?
No.
Okay. What's the address of the business?
Give me a second.
Sure.
Um, it's Unit 101,
Mm-hmm.
3107,
Yeah.
29th Avenue,
Okay.
Vernon, BC,
Mm-hmm.
V1T,
Yep.
1Z2.
Okay, terrific. All right. Now, can you tell me a little bit about the history of CDG Enterprises, please?
For history, we're a home building company. We've been in existence in some form or function for about 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
For the first 24 years of that, we were essentially like a mom and pa home builder operation. I took over 7 years ago.
Okay.
And we became like a pre-selling and spec home building and marketing company that basically actively targets customers versus looking for 1 or 2 home builds a year.
Okay. And when you say you took over 7 years ago, is it that you bought the company or?
I reformed the company. It was my uncle's company who essentially like was closing down.
Okay. Okay. All right. What was your motivation when you took over the company?
I was a lawyer and hated being a lawyer.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Okay. Now tell me, how's the company progressed since you've taken over?
Well, we've grown from, in 7 years, we've grown from like $1 million in revenue to this year will be in excess of 20 million.
Okay. And what do you attribute that to?
Systems and just being set up as a company versus being set up as a normal, just mom and pop shop that hopes people come in.
Okay.
But most important, systems that allow us to hire staff and have other people actively doing jobs.
Okay. Okay. Very good. All right. Now, tell me, I mean, obviously you've just mentioned the issue of systemization, and obviously you've also mentioned the fact that the company has existed in one way or another for the last 30 years. But what else sets you apart in the marketplace?
We offer financing for your build, and most importantly, we have stuff pre-priced and ready to go. So the towns that we operate in are like under 30,000 people, under 50,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And in those towns, you typically see no, like nobody has anything prepared. So if I came to you and said, hey, I'd like to build a house, you'd ask me what house, I'd show you a house plan. In a month or two, you'd get back to me with a price, where we have prices that are pre-priced and ready to go that allow people to move quickly which buyers don't like waiting 2 months for quotes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's all based upon that system of having stuff pre-priced, having things actively ready to purchase, and then actively pursuing quotes for all of those houses that are pre-priced. So you can give somebody 8 to 12 quotes in 15 to 20 minutes, which makes people want to make buying decisions because it's now fun. It's like shopping versus like pulling teeth by asking your mechanic how much is your vehicle going to cost.
Sure. Okay. Well,
and that level of certainty is what is kind of provided our differentiation factor in those small towns.
Uh-huh.
And because our quoting and our estimating is so good, we don't use budgets. So typically home buyers would use budgets with their client. So your kitchen's going to cost $15,000. If it exceeds $15,000, you're paying me the difference. We use actual products where they're already priced, so we don't use budgets. So in this line of work, like people think they're going to spend one price and by the time they're finished, it costs another price. We don't believe in that. So we work on flat fees that always remain that flat fee, which again gives the customer certainty.
Okay. All right. Let me just circle back for a moment to something you said. Now, you were talking about small towns. Do you have like a geographic like radius, I guess, of, what your geographic segment is?
We work in Northwest British Columbia, so Terrace and surrounding area. So about 200 kilometers surrounding the Terrace, BC area.
Mm-hmm.
We work out of Castlegar, BC, and 200 kilometers surrounding that area.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it for right now.
Okay, that's good. Okay. Now, are you able to somehow profile for me your target market, or how diverse is it?
It's super diverse because we're in that small town, right?
I see. Let's say budget-wise. I mean, are they, sort of like, we're talking about middle class, upper class, or?
We're mid-class, but there's no upper class in the towns that we're in. Our home prices are like $400,000 to $700,000.
I see. And typically, again, so you can't say that you're talking about families or retirees or immigrants or anything specifically.
It's working class.
Working class.
Right? So it's lots of like police transfers, hospital workers, school teachers.
Okay. Very good. All right. Now, tell me a little bit about the system. So, I mean, obviously you were talking about the quoting system. So once a customer approaches you for a quote, so just to recap, how long does it take generally for you to be able to provide that to them?
10 minutes.
Okay. Once it's been provided, let's suppose that the customer accepts it.
Yeah.
What are the next steps? What happens?
They make their selections. So their selections are like their colors.
Mm-hmm.
And once they select their colors, they then go to the bank, get their conditions and their approval and their financing. Once they do that, we go in for a permit. Once they do that, they pay a deposit, which is 5% of the purchase price. And then we go in for building permit, and then we begin construction.
Okay. And typically, how long does that generally take then between the deposit being paid and the construction beginning?
It's difficult to say, but typically like 30 to 45 days.
I see. Okay. And generally,
it kind of rests on governmental approval, and sometimes the governmental approval, especially in these small towns, they're on vacation for 2 weeks.
I see.
So you can end up with like heavily fluctuating, or they're going on vacation in 1 week, so they get you the permit in 1 week.
Yeah. I see what you mean. Okay. Okay, so construction starts. Typically, how long does it take?
4 months.
Okay. So at the end of the 4 months or halfway through, I mean, do they pay extra as they go along, or how does that work as far as the payments is concerned?
No, they pay at the end. So 30 days before their house is ready, they receive a 30-day notice. They go to the bank and their lawyers, get all the paperwork done for closing day.
Okay. Okay. All right. Very nice. Okay. How do you market your services?
Word of mouth is primary.
I see.
And that's how we find our initial leads and stuff like that are typically word of mouth. All of our marketing and stuff that's online, all of our stuff that we do to like find people is more to solidify leads. People typically don't drop $500,000 or $600,000 without talking to somebody first.
Yeah.
So it typically in the small towns, and because we're such a factor in those small towns, we're 30 to 70%, depending on the town that we're in, of the new single family home building. So if they're looking to build a new house or looking for a new house, they're probably going to run into us through word of mouth.
I see. I see. Have you ever actually tried any specific marketing channels or actions, like, say sales representatives or online marketing or anything, or traditional marketing, anything like that?
I have. There's a salesperson in the Northwest region. There's a salesperson in the Castlegar region. So they work out of a showroom, like retail establishment. They do get walk-ins, not very often. Facebook marketing works phenomenally well in towns we're not in.
Mm-hmm. I see.
But we just don't have the capacity. So with our growth rate, we're trying to target like 1x growth a year. We're meeting that without doing those things. Okay. So we've done it just to kind of see like what additional work is out there, and it's definitely abundant. It's just with our current growth structure, the money doesn't keep up. I can't go from 10 million to 40 million. I can go from 10 million to 20 million in a year. That's it.
I see. Okay. All right. Well, tell me a little bit about the organization. How many people actually work in the organization?
For more than 10, less than 15.
Okay. Okay, so we've got you at the very top. Let's just talk a little bit about your role. What would be your role? What would be the usual hours that you work?
My role's rather limited. My role doesn't exist with like a proper ownership group or exist in a different function. So my role is based on basically monitoring money and completions.
Okay.
And it's not in a typical sense of like forecasting. We run so very lean that I'm manipulating closing dates by 1 or 2 days to make sure that we're making our payments and purchasing our land and stuff. And I'm targeting certain prices. So when we do build a spec house or something, we know we can only hold that house for 30 days. So I'm targeting the fact that that house has to go out to maintain basically cash flow.
I see.
I have a manager who looks after everything to do with everything construction, and most of the sales stuff that I basically just step on his feet and change those things. So my manager, Don Neufeld, he's got 30 years plus of managing like large home builders, like $100 million companies, who looks after construction and we kind of share on the sales management, again, due to that cash flow restraint.
Okay. Okay. All right. And then you've mentioned that you've got sales staff as well.
Then each area is made up of a sales manager, which is really just a sales staff because nobody works under them, but.
Sure. Okay.
And each area has a project manager.
Okay. So the assembly, I mean, the labor itself, is that done through contractors or through employees?
Contractors.
Contractors. How many contractors would you estimate that the business has?
Lots.
I mean, roughly.
Over 100.
Over 100. Okay. And how's that been, I mean, in terms of, given the unique nature of the product that you're offering, I mean, how does it work as far as training them, as far as keeping standards? You know, how is that put into place?
The sales staff manages it from a customer standpoint, and the construction manager, project manager manages it from a construction standpoint. So the setup is really the construction project manager is working, building the house. The sales manager is touring the house, taking pictures, updating their client, and at the same time, they're updating management and admin on the progress of the house and maintaining like quality control. So before it goes to a customer, it's obviously been seen, inspected, improved by sales. And that's how it's maintained.
Okay. All right. Okay, that's really good. Let's talk a little bit about the location. Now, you mentioned earlier the location. Is that like a head office? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's administrative and accounting.
Okay.
So the one location that's in Vernon, BC is basically admin and accounting. So I have my CPAs there, one of my bookkeepers there, my receptionist is there, and then the project managers both have an assistant, and they work out of that central office doing scheduling, ordering items, things of that nature. And that's really our control base. So everything runs through that as kind of a separate form of financial controls as well as quality controls. But we don't typically struggle with contractors on a quality control basis. Our contractors are very artistic and want to produce the best item for their small town that they live in.
I see.
We struggle on a cost control basis with them. Sometimes their friend's one of the sub trades and they'd like their friend to have that contract. And that's why the addition of the project coordinator out of Vernon and not out of that small town was to just give that management and investment group that extra level of, they're working right beside the accountant and the accountant's watching their purchase orders and watching their things. And they're not getting that emotional attachment to any individual trade because they're not located within the area. So that's why that centralized office exists.
I see. And you mentioned that you've also got a showroom elsewhere. Is that correct?
Yeah, both Castlegar and Terrace have showrooms.
Both of those.
So they both.
Okay.
Yeah, so the areas we operate in, the salesperson has a retail establishment.
Okay. All right. And that retail establishment, I mean, is it just an area that's leased within an existing building, or?
I own the building in Terrace, and Castlegar, we lease a building, yes, within like just a standard, office building.
Okay.
Has a showroom and a couple of offices, and that's it.
Okay. I don't suppose you've got the address for the two showrooms, do you?
Terrace, I know. It's 3169 Cofed Drive, Terrace, BC. And Castlegar address, I bet you I can find. Uh, 1037 Columbia Avenue, Castlegar, BC.
Okay. All right. Okay. Now, let's do a quick SWOT analysis just to recap some of the points. Obviously, we're exploring this from the point of view of a prospective buyer. So let's suppose for a moment that I'm that buyer, okay, somebody that's interested in the business, okay? Tell me about really the key selling points, the key strengths of the business that you would present to me. I mean, I would suggest, just to start off with, obviously, the systemization, the uniqueness of the product and the delivery method, the fact that you've obviously established an excellent internal structure as far as obviously the management and the operational teams. What else would you add to that? Lyle, are you there? Lyle, I think you accidentally muted yourself.
Unmute.
Oh, there you go.
The system will allow you to continue growth. So, we have a system that'll bring us basically to 40 million in revenue. We have a staff that will bring us to 40 million in revenue. We're holding extra staff right now because we wanted to have that extra growth space set up, because I'm really tired of rebuilding an accounting and administrative office every year. So this way I don't have to rebuild it for 2 years. And then the system that we have really guards against control. So it allows for a passive investment, with controls in place. So to liquidity, my company is 4 to 5 months out, meaning every single project that's in the works, minus about $1 million worth of assets, is liquid like immediately because it's already pre-sold. So most construction companies and things like that are into contracts that last in duration 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. They're really at the mercy of market controls. Prices go up. They're not reflecting their prices because they're in this contract already. We're reflecting our active prices, which the best way to describe that is lumber's gone up 400% in the last 8 months. Our margins have maintained the exact same because we issue a purchase order for lumber the second that we get our house contract. So those are huge strengths of our business. The other main strength that relates back to our system is that in British Columbia and in Western Canada, there's this big push for energy. Energy efficiency, energy building, energy techniques. These techniques are murdering the custom home builders. So the builders that don't have pre-priced house plans are requiring additional engineering, additional time, and in some cases not even able to build what they were historically able to build because of these BC building step code, which is a building code that requires that you get an energy advisor, and by 2032 every house will have to be a passive house. Our system is ready and implemented for those changes. So the Castlegar region implemented step code like 2 months ago. We've seen absolutely no delay in anything. Some of our competition has spent the last 3 months trying to get a permit and has been unable to receive a permit because they don't understand the form and function of these houses. What's happening in Western Canada is Calgary, Vancouver, Edmonton, Kelowna, the big centers, are dictating housing policy, dictating subtrade policy, dictating how and when we build. And they're building not in single family residences, but they're building in townhouses, skyscrapers. So the trade base and the government function is really pursuing, hey, it's not that much work to put a little extra insulation in a skyrise. And in a single family metric, it's extremely difficult. In a small town, it's extremely difficult to teach, educate, have the details available to your trade base of how you actually accomplish this. And that is really what our huge advantages of like moving forward into the future is just the government intervention, the shortage of housing supply, the ability of people to effectuate change in these towns. It requires consolidation. It requires a market participant with size and scale and administrative. And these small towns have typically just been me and my wife are a home builder and we work out of our house. It's what we came from. It's what my uncle was for 20 years. They can no longer do it because the administrative function is moving so fast. That if you're not spending money and time and have budget allocated and time allocated to research development, you're going to be left behind. An instance of that is 3 years ago, BC implemented basically continued education for home builders. So you're required to do 32 hours of classroom work a year. For my company, that's not a big deal. I spend, 32 hours in videos and on a classroom, or I go down to Vancouver and I take that. When you're a 3-man operation, which is who our competition is, that's a week off. That's death to your business when you say, hey, my wife's going to want to go away for 2 weeks. Now these people are part-time because these governments are making these items that much difficulty. The competition that we have are typically like trades. So they're typically like carpenters with hammers in their hands. And the amount of work and energy that goes into the paperwork involved. So a really exaggerated example, but a great example is in Vernon, BC. My father built a house here 10 years ago. The building application was 2 pages long. I bought a piece of property here and just looked at the building application the other day. It's 32 pages long. These are actual administrative functions now, and it's not just a building function. The building function actually builds itself, provided that you have proper planning, proper preparation, or proper system. And these small companies just are not going to be able to do it. They're already struggling. And with 2 or 3 more administrative agencies coming up with new and additional things, there's going to be no market there for them. They're not going to be able to make a profit on it because you have a girl sitting in an office who fills out permits every day, and she's rather efficient out of it. No different than the way the internet is done with administration and word processing did with, if you don't work on it every day, you better not try to work on it. You better pay somebody. So those are our strengths. Our main weakness is our depth of market. So our markets are small towns. So if the mill shuts down in our small town in Castlegar, Castlegar does not exist.
I see.
And that's why we want the diversity of multiple small towns, because when Castlegar doesn't exist, that trade base will move. The way we got started in Northwest BC and Terrace was Castlegar was very slow. So the trade base came with us to Terrace when my uncle was closing down his business and I was starting. So it can also be a strength as far as these groups then begin to travel with you, because if there's no work for you in that town, there's no work for them. But the general depth of market is the risk of that business existing in that town. There's not a risk of losing money, because with your deposit structure, your profit margin built into the house, your quick turnaround time, you'd require a 35% drop in the market within 3 months to actually lose money. But there isn't a chance that that market may not be there. Now, both towns have mills that have been, both areas have, primary mills that have been open for 50, 70 years. So I'm not saying they're going to close. We've just all seen examples on the news of towns that this has occurred. So that's usually the main investor objection, is that depth of market, that inability to liquidate You can't go build 30 houses in that town in one day and expect them to sell in one day. There's just not the depth to sell that many units in that town in that time period. It's also what I deem the strength, because we have the big builders come in from the big centers and throw up 32-bedroom townhouses and wonder why they sit there for 10 years. Well, they sit there because there's no depth of market to buy 2-bedroom townhouses. They would have built them at a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom, a 4-bedroom, and a 5-bedroom. They would have had enough depth of market to get out of it. But that's not what big city builders do. So that's our main weaknesses on that depth of market. Again, related to that depth of market is our trade base. I mean, we have 2 drywallers in each town. We pay a premium to have 2 drywallers in each town so that they don't own us. Now that large weakness, as we begin to get into additional regions, 3 or 4 more regions or 2 or 3 more regions, kind of goes away, because you can pay a guy to live in a hotel for 3 days to go drywall your house in that region that's 3 hours away.
Yeah.
But right now, that is a risk to us, is that trade base. And as we're entering these small towns, I mean, we're entering small towns where the outsider, we're not necessarily welcomed with open arms. Now we overcome that by hiring our project manager as being somebody local. He's typically a home builder who's just tired of the paperwork. Usually the government has came at him because he hasn't paid his taxes, being his own entrepreneurial spirit. And he's typically who we hire, which we overcome that by basically he becomes kind of backed by an investment group and a sales group, and they go, "Oh, I'm building with Colin and Castlegar." Because that's what people in small towns view, is they're building with that person. They don't say my realtor is Remax. They say my realtor is Laura. Yeah. She's great. She's this and that. So we want to bring that small town vibe to it by doing that. But those are definitely our only weakness in that game, is that depth of market. And that's how we're overcoming it, is by making sure we're in quick, out quick, doing pre-sales. We're not purchasing, 50 lots at a time. I will pay a premium to buy lots as we go, because I want to eliminate that risk. I also eliminate some of the reward, but for us, we're able to make a reasonable profit margin and a great ROI on our money operating that way. So that's why we believe in kind of those facets.
I see. Very interesting. Okay. Excuse me. Sorry. Okay, well, let me ask you this then. Oh, sorry. Before what's the reason for sale?
I'm tired of being a financial manager. I tried. So for the last 18 months, I looked for private investment. The problem is I can find a long list of investors that will invest in my company. Mm-hmm. The personal guarantees and the security and the things that they require, on a personal level, kind of puts me last to get paid. They're coming in with equity, meaning we'll take 50% of the equity, but by the way, you're going to hedge all of our stuff as if it's debt. And I have $4 million in this company. And I'm like, hold on a second. So I'm last to get paid and I'm giving up 50% control. This doesn't seem very good. And oh, by the way, you're in a big shiny suit in a big shiny office, and these are the type of deals you do for a living. That scares the shit out of me. Just from a family side. I'm not a fancy person. We're kind of, hot dogs and macaroni and cheese was dinner last night for me and my 2 kids. Right. So it's just really tough to justify that risk, to my family.
I see.
Of moving kind of into that outside investment with those kind of bigger guys. Mm-hmm. And we tried to restructure 6 different deals to get to where we were control, and it wasn't going to happen. You're never getting into those guys' checkbook without giving up control, mm-hmm. or at least equal control. And then at the end of the day, I mean, my goal is to watch something grow. So I believe that we can get to 100 million within 2 to 3 years. And then from there, we start looking like into other provinces and across our country. And then, I don't know what it can become. I mean, I can make reasonable forecasts that can get us to, a publicly held $1 billion market cap company, within the next 7 to 10 years.
Wow.
And that's really what I want to see. More so than what I want to see is my prosperity. Mm-hmm. My prosperity isn't tied to like individual monetary value. My prosperity is tied to like this idea and this concept growing. The sales girl in Paris is my family's best friend. She came as a waitress, got trained. Now she makes over $100,000 a year. So watching something that can live on forever and in perpetuity is more important to me. And I'm guessing due to the valuation of it, it's going to passive investors, which may or may not lead to me being able to stay on for 3 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. And seeing where that goes as far as just getting to do that, which now brings me into the active role of running the business versus the pessimistic role of checking the bank account, making sure payables are paid, making sure forecast is good, bribing trades with an extra $20,000 to finish that house 3 weeks early so that you can get paid the $600,000 so you can move on to the next house. I'd like that problem to become somebody else's.
I understand. Okay. Now, keeping in mind, of course, that Kerry will provide us with additional information. Plus, of course, I see your website is quite comprehensive. So taking that bit aside, do you feel like there are any areas that I haven't addressed about the business in this, in this interview?
No.
Anything you want to bring to my attention?
No.
Okay. All right. Okay. So look, I mean, with that in mind, then I think that we've got plenty to start with. Of course, obviously, we'll provide you with the first draft. And if for whatever reason you feel like either we've missed a mark or that we haven't addressed anything specifically, let us know. We'll tweak it around till it's perfect.
Can you send me an example of what you're putting together?
Yeah, of course. No problems. I think actually I've got one in here in the care. Yeah, that's fine. I'll send one over to you.
If you send one over to me, I can probably provide you, because I have pitch decks and all sorts of things from our run at private investments.
Oh, that's wonderful. Look, I mean, if you do, that'll be fantastic because they'll provide you with a lot more information. I can send you 7
and they're different, they were directed towards different people, meaning that one was directed to minority interest, that was directed towards debt, but they kind of go over the similar stuff.
Sure.
So I'll just dig through my email and find the 6 or 7 of those and just forward them to you. Take them for what they're worth.
Perfect. I'll send over to you one that's a fictional business that we use as a sample just to show what it looks like at the end of the day.
Then I can just try to supplement based upon that. That's a question they asked of that business. I get it's going to be different, but at least I can provide you with some written documents and stuff that kind of are along that lines.
That'll be fantastic.
And then Kerry can look after the financials and stuff with you, but I'll give you kind of the 1,000-mile snapshot.
Beautiful. Anything additional as well? Sort of, for example, let's say a breakdown, if you have a breakdown in sales per product, that would also be advantageous because you can then build charts, kind of, just showing to the prospective buyer, sort of.
We're not that big, unfortunately. Last year we were only 27 sales. This year will be 40 sales.
Sure.
So those charts tend to not look very good. I do have a couple that I'll send you, but they tend to be 2 sales of one model. When you have 8 models and you only had 12 sales, it doesn't really give you that much. And it's not really indicative of the market because you might have 3 teachers that move to town with 3 kids one year. And then the next year, the 3 teachers that move to town who buy houses might have 0 kids.
I see.
And you're like, oh, why is this market changing? It's not really changing. They hired 3 people. That year, it just happened to be people with family.
I get it. Yeah. No, I understand. But look, I'll send it over to you. Like I said, the more information we have, the better the final product will be.
Yep. I'll give it to you and take it for what it's worth and go from there.
Fantastic. Excellent. Lyle, thank you very, very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Terrific. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
See ya.